What if you did everything you could for your son to become a successful man, and he became homeless? What would you do? Subscribe to the channel and leave your opinion in the comments. Henrique was a 10-year-old boy who grew up in a home where simplicity was constant, but love was unwavering. His parents, Jonas and Priscilla, despite all the financial difficulties, always made a point of keeping him enrolled in the best school in the neighborhood. They deeply believed that education would be the path to a better future for their son, even if it meant daily sacrifices that often left invisible scars. The day started early in that modest house, almost imperceptible in the urban landscape of the neighborhood. The light of dawn had barely begun to dye the sky a pale blue when Jonas was already on his feet, moving with the silent, meticulous routine of someone who knows that every minute counts. The silence of the early morning was only interrupted by the soft noise of the car's engine as it started, a sound that Jonas knew as well as the rhythm of his own heart. He watched the empty streets through the windshield, the streetlights still on, casting long, unsettling shadows on the asphalt. These were moments of solitary reflection, when Jonas relived the past, a time when his life took a very different course. Jonas had been an engineer, a respected professional, with a promising future. But life, with its unpredictable twists and turns, placed him in a situation where engineering became a distant, almost unattainable dream. The dismissal had been a severe blow, not only to his finances but also to his pride. Now, he drove the city streets as a private driver, a job that, while worthy, did not fill the void left by the loss of his career. The promise of a new job, of a fresh start, seemed increasingly distant, like a lighthouse in the fog, visible but always out of reach. Priscilla, in turn, also had her own daily battles. She woke up almost at the same time as Jonas, in a silent and well-rehearsed choreography. While Jonas was getting ready to leave, she prepared breakfast for Henrique, making sure everything was perfect. Every detail mattered, the bread toasted just right, the fresh fruit cut into small pieces, the natural juice that she prepared herself. It was her way of ensuring that Henrique felt her affection and presence, even when they were not together. She always left a note on the table, something simple but affectionate, to let her son know that, even though she was away, she was thinking about him all the time. Then she would go to her job as a caregiver for the elderly, where she would spend long hours listening to other people's stories, while her own worries and fatigue silently accumulated. Priscilla worked for 3 different families, taking care of elderly people who needed constant attention. Each house she visited had its particularities: a man who liked to discuss politics, a lady who still embroidered even with her hands shaking, another who rarely spoke but enjoyed the company in silence. Priscilla was dedicated and affectionate to everyone, but behind her calm smile, there was an exhaustion that she didn't let show. She knew her work was necessary, not just for the money it brought home, but also because it gave her a purpose, a way to contribute to her family's well-being. Henrique, when he woke up, found his mother's note and felt comforted. He knew his parents were working hard for him to have a better life, and that inspired him to be the best student and son he could be. At school, Henrique also stood out. He helped the teacher tidy up the room, erased the board at the end of the class, and was always ready to help his classmates who needed help, whether it was solving a complicated equation or finding a solution during games during recess. If no one wanted to be the goalkeeper, Henrique volunteered, even though he loved scoring goals. His parents were often asked by other parents how they had managed to raise such a well-mannered and generous son. "We provide love and discipline as well as an example, of course," replied Priscilla with a tired but satisfied smile. "But life, with its complexities, often offers lessons that cannot be learned at home or at school." One day, while Henrique was playing in the park, he saw a man who looked out of place, as if he were the wrong piece in a perfect puzzle. The man was thin, his clothes were dirty and worn, and his gaze was lost. He seemed to be in one place, but his mind was wandering somewhere else. The children became restless. Some of them ran to tell their parents, while others just watched from afar, not knowing what to do. Henry, with his innocence and innate desire to help, felt compelled to approach the man. He offered the stranger a sandwich his mother had made for him and a bottle of water. The man accepted the offer, ate slowly in silence, while Henrique watched every movement, trying to understand who this stranger was. While the man was eating, Henrique tried to start a conversation. She asked his name, where he lived, if he had a family. The answers he received were vague, confusing. The man didn't seem to be sure of his name. He was talking about a house with yellow bricks. But Henrique knew that there were no houses like that in his neighborhood. Henrique's questions continued, but the answers only brought more doubts. He had never met someone like this before, someone who needed help, but didn't know how to ask for it. Meanwhile, Priscilla was returning from work earlier than usual. She had managed to leave a little earlier to spend more time with Henrique, something she rarely managed to do. But when she arrived at the park and saw her son sitting next to that strange man, something inside her broke. Fear gripped Priscilla in a way she had never experienced before. Adrenaline drove her to run towards Henrique, shouting for him to stay away. She didn't see the man as a person in need, but rather as an invisible threat, a potential danger that could destroy everything she loved. Priscilla expelled the man from the park with harsh words, full of fear and frustration. She wasn't sure what she was saying. She just knew she needed to remove the danger from her son. When the man finally left, she hurriedly took Henrique home, her heart still pounding in her chest, as if she had run a marathon herself. Back at the small house, Jonas and Priscilla scolded Henrique. They had already explained countless times that he shouldn't talk to strangers, that the world was full of dangers that he didn't yet understand. Henrique, still confused, just listened, without responding. He just wanted to help, but now he felt like he had done something wrong. At night, Priscilla returned to her son's room, sat next to him, and, in a calmer voice, tried to explain that they acted that way because they loved him, and that they couldn't bear to see something bad happen to him. Henrique listened, nodding his head in agreement, but deep down, he couldn't get the image of that man in the park out of his mind. In the following days, the incident in the park became the talk of the neighborhood. The children at school began to treat Henrique differently. He, who was previously seen as an example of good behavior, was now avoided by some colleagues and used as an example of irresponsibility by mothers. The school organized lectures on safety, on the importance of not talking to strangers, and Henrique, embarrassed, felt increasingly isolated. He couldn't understand why no one saw what he saw, a man who needed help and not a dangerous stranger. The situation became even more tense when, a few days later, 2 police officers knocked on Henrique's door. Jonas was alone with his son, as Priscilla was on duty. The apprehensive father met the police, who asked about the incident in the park. They wanted to know details about the man Henry had found, and Jonas, with a heavy heart, told them everything he knew. After listening to the father's report, the police asked to speak to Henrique, who answered their questions with the same patience and sincerity. They took note of everything, but when Jonas asked why they were investigating the case, the police said they could not give details of the investigation. The police officer's visit left Jonas and Priscilla even more worried. If the police were involved, perhaps this man was more dangerous than they imagined. The fear that something could happen to Henrique intensified, and they took extra care when walking the streets, always alert. The following weekend, Henrique went to spend Saturday at the house of one of his grandmothers, Anastasia, while his parents worked. Anastasia, a strict woman who always demanded a lot from her children, melted with her grandchildren, doing all their wishes. She lived in a spacious apartment, in a large building with several play areas where the children could play safely. That day, Henrique was playing 3 cuts with his colleagues, winning most of the games, when one of the boys, when trying to eliminate Henrique, hit the ball too hard, causing it to leave the building. Without thinking twice, Henrique offered to get the ball. He ran out the gate, around the block, and then stopped suddenly when he saw, sitting on the ground, leaning against a post, the same man he had met in the park. The man looked even thinner and dirtier than before, and his expression was the same, lost, lifeless. Henrique felt butterflies in his stomach. He remembered the words of his parents and the police officers, who had made clear the danger of talking to strangers. But still, he felt an immense desire to help that man. Something inside him said that this man was not dangerous, but someone who needed help. But this time, Henrique was more cautious. Instead of approaching, he stayed a few meters away and said good morning, without receiving a response. "Do you remember me? We saw each other last week. Henrique said, trying again to start a conversation. But the man remained silent, his eyes fixed on the ground. I'm sorry my mom yelled at you. She was just worried about me. The man didn't react. Henrique tried another approach. Where is your family? The man mumbled something about family, but his words were difficult to understand. Henrique felt that perhaps he was getting closer to some answer, but frustration was growing inside him. Maybe the adults were right. Maybe he couldn't help that man alone. It was then that Henrique had an idea. The adults were really right. He couldn't help that man alone, but he knew someone who could. Having made up his mind, Henrique turned around and ran towards the neighborhood police station. He knew where it was, because he passed by it every time he went to his grandmother's house. With his heart racing, he entered the police station, attracting the attention of the police officers. A young police officer named Marcella immediately approached, worried about what a child was doing there alone. Henrique told him everything, about the man he had met in the park, about the sandwich he offered him, about the repercussions at school, and about the man being on the street again, near his grandmother's building. He stressed that the man did not appear to be dangerous, but rather someone who was scared and needed help. Marcella listened attentively, and understanding the seriousness of the situation, tried to take the necessary measures. While 3 police officers were sent to look for the man, Marcella accompanied Henrique back to his grandmother's house. He wanted to go along to see the man, but the police officer didn't allow him. Henrique obeyed, although inside he was frustrated. When they arrived at her grandmother's house, Anastasia was scared to see her grandson with a police officer, but she soon calmed down when she heard what had happened. She hugged Henrique and said, "You did the right thing, my love. Come, I'll give you a bowl of ice cream." At night, when Priscilla went to pick up Henrique, Anastasia told her everything that had happened. Priscilla, distressed but also proud, was happy to see that her son had acted in an exemplary manner. She didn't know what had happened to that stranger, and she didn't want to know. All that mattered was that his son was okay. The following week seemed to have returned to normal. Jonas continued working as a driver and looking for a job in his field in the few hours he had left. Priscilla, in turn, worked long hours taking care of the elderly, while Henrique studied, helped around the house, and played whenever he could. But they had no idea that their lives were about to change forever. On Thursday night, someone knocked on Henrique's door. Jonas and Priscilla looked at each other, apprehensive. They didn't want any more surprises. Jonas, exhausted, rubbed his face with his hands and went to answer the phone. On the other side of the door was a lady of about 50, wearing a long-sleeved white blouse and a long yellow skirt. "Good evening. Is this where Henrique's family lives?" asked the woman with a shy smile. "Sorry to come unannounced. My name is Tanya, and I came here as soon as I found out that you were the ones who found my husband." Jonas and Priscilla were confused, not understanding what the woman was talking about. But the lady, clearly anxious and happy, began to explain. A few months ago, Luis Fernando, Tanya's husband, started to feel severe headaches and decided to go to the hospital. There, he was diagnosed with meningitis and immediately hospitalized. The doctor said if he had waited another day to get help, it might have been too late. The period of hospitalization was distressing for Tanya and her children. Few people survive such a serious illness, and even fewer without sequelae. Fortunately, Luis Fernando managed to recover, but doctors explained that he would suffer from memory loss for a while. At first, the symptoms were mild. He confused the days of the week, changed the names of things. The family dealt with the situation lightly, laughing at some exchanges of words and supporting Luis Fernando in his recovery. But as time passed, Luis Fernando began to recover and, feeling safer, decided to go out to walk the street alone. The first few times, he just walked around the block and came home without any problems. But on one of those trips, he didn't return. Tanya became desperate, called the police, searched the neighborhood, but Luis Fernando seemed to have disappeared. That was a month ago. Then one day she learned that the police had found her husband, thanks to a boy who had offered a sandwich to a man on the street. Tanya had no doubt that this boy was Henrique. And now, here she was, at the door of his house, to personally thank the family who had helped her find her husband. Jonas and Priscilla's jaws dropped. No one had imagined that that strange man in the square was, in fact, someone lost from their family and in need of help. No one, except Henrique. Tanya wanted to hear their version of the story, and was even more grateful when she got to know better those people who had saved her husband's life. She not only thanked him, but also announced that her gratitude would not be just in words. Luis Fernando needed professional support, even more so after having spent so many days on the street, and Tanya invited Priscilla to be Luis Fernando's caregiver. As she already had an elderly mother and aunt, Tanya ensured that Priscilla would remain hired, even after Luis Fernando was completely recovered. The payment offered was even greater than all the payments Priscilla received from the 3 families she worked for, and she would no longer need to work 2 shifts in a row, nor be on shift. Furthermore, Luis Fernando was an engineer, and the company where he worked needed to hire a new engineer for the team, as it had not yet been completely restructured since he went on medical leave. Jonas finally could return to work in his field. Tanya also committed to sponsoring Henrique's studies until he finished college. He was the one to whom she owed the greatest gratitude, so the boy would never lack for anything. The family couldn't believe what was happening, and even said they couldn't accept it all, but Tanya was unyielding. She said that in truth everything was for Henrique, and of course the parents would not refuse their son's future. Indeed, Henrique and his family's lives changed for the better. Priscilla worked in Tanya and Luis's house for 2 years, until Luis Fernando was completely recovered. After that, he started taking care of Tanya's mother. Jonas went to work at the same company where Luis worked and dedicated himself to becoming an indispensable employee, even being promoted within a few months. With the financial improvement, the family was finally able to pay for their own property, a 2-bedroom apartment that was not luxurious, but was perfect for the family. Henrique's greatest joy was seeing his parents with a room to themselves and a separate room for meals, for receiving visitors and with plenty of space to play. Henrique continued studying at the school he liked so much until he graduated from high school. When he came first in the entrance exam, he received all the college books as a gift from Tanya and Luis Fernando. The 2 families remained close for the rest of their lives, always helping and strengthening each other. Henrique grew, and with each passing day, he inspired more people with his humility and eternal desire to help. His schoolmates, college and work colleagues, teachers, family, and closest friends all agreed that Henrique was an unforgettable boy and an example of a citizen. Even the older ones learned from him and had their faith in humanity renewed thanks to the boy who always saw the good inside people, regardless of what was seen on the outside. And Henrique never let any praise inflate his ego. Quite the contrary, he was inspired by them to be a better person every day. Henrique never let any praise inflate his ego. Quite the contrary, he was inspired by them to be a better person every day. But life, with its twists and turns, always finds ways to challenge us, testing our character and determination. As the years passed, Henrique found himself facing the typical challenges of adolescence, but with a worldview shaped by his previous experiences. The incident with the man in the park and the changes it brought to his life continued to resonate in his mind. He was aware that his family had been blessed with a series of unexpected opportunities, and he felt a deep responsibility to honor those opportunities. At school, he stood out not only for his good grades, but also for his ability to mediate conflicts between classmates, demonstrating maturity beyond his years. Teachers often praised his ability to view situations in a balanced and fair way, and his colleagues knew they could count on Henrique to listen to their problems and offer wise advice. At home, the family's financial situation had improved significantly. Jonas had been promoted to a management position at the company where he worked, and Priscilla, in addition to continuing to care for Tanya's mother, had begun to manage a small group of caregivers, coordinating care and schedules. Moving to the new apartment had brought greater comfort to everyone, and for the first time in a long time, Jonas and Priscilla could breathe a little easier. Despite this, Henrique never forgot his roots and the values that his parents taught him. He continued to help around the house, now with more responsibilities, such as preparing dinner on the days when Priscilla had meetings or helping Jonas with small administrative tasks related to his work. He also actively participated in school activities, getting involved in social projects, and organizing fundraising campaigns for causes he believed were important. One day, upon returning from school, Enrique found Jonas sitting at the kitchen table, leafing through some papers with a worried expression. There was something in the air, a subtle tension that Enrique soon noticed. Jonas, who was usually reserved about work problems, this time seemed to need to vent. "Dad, is everything okay?" Enrique asked, pulling out a chair and sitting next to him. Jonas sighed deeply and looked at his son, his face reflecting a mix of pride and concern. "Enrique, I know you're young, but you've been through so much that I believe you can understand. The company I work for is going through a restructuring, and there are rumors that cuts are coming. I'm worried that may be affected." Enrique felt a tightness in his chest when he heard his father's words. He knew how much that job meant to Jonas, not only for supporting his family, but also for the dignity he had regained by returning to work in his field of training. "But Dad, you're one of the best employees. They're not going to send you away, are they?" Enrique asked, trying to hide the concern he felt. "I hope not, son. But the truth is, in moments like these, competence isn't always what counts. Sometimes decisions are made for reasons beyond our control," Jonas replied, with a tone of resignation that Enrique was not used to hearing. This conversation marked Enrique in a way he did not expect. For the first time, he saw the vulnerability of his father, a man who had always been his rock, the family's protector. From that moment on, Enrique decided that he would do everything in his power to help the family, whether through his studies or by finding ways to contribute financially. A few months passed, and the situation at Jonas's company remained uncertain. During this period, Enrique decided to look for part-time work to alleviate some of the financial burden on his parents. He began giving private lessons to younger children, helping them with the subjects he had mastered. In addition to earning some money, he discovered a new passion for teaching and helping others learn. This new routine was not easy. Enrique divided his time between school, work, and responsibilities at home, but he felt motivated by the desire to support his family. And, to his surprise, he found support in unexpected places. Tanya, who remained very close to the family, offered Enrique the opportunity to work with her on some social projects that she coordinated. These projects ranged from food collections to mentoring programs for at-risk youth. Enrique accepted immediately, seeing it as a chance to make an even bigger difference. Life continued its course, and little by little, Jonas's job worries began to dissipate. The company underwent restructuring, and although some cuts were made, Jonas was retained, which brought immense relief to the entire family. However, this experience left its mark on both Jonas and Enrique, reinforcing the importance of always being prepared for life's uncertainties. Over time, Enrique's work in private classes and Tanya's social projects began to attract the attention of other parents and teachers. He became a respected figure in the school community, someone everyone trusted and admired. His work with younger children was especially praised, as he not only helped them academically but also became a mentor, someone who offered advice and emotional support. One day, Tanya called him for a chat after a meeting of one of the social projects. They were in Tanya's office, a cozy room decorated with photographs of families who had benefited from the programs she coordinated. She looked at Enrique with a proud smile and said, "Enrique, I have watched how much you have grown and developed in recent years. The impact you have had on these children's lives is extraordinary. I believe you have a future brilliant, and I'd like to help you explore it further." Enrique was surprised, but also honored by Tanya's words. "I don't know what to say. I just do what I think is right." That's what makes everything so special, Enrique. You act with your heart, and that's what makes the difference. I would like to offer you a scholarship to college, something that Luis Fernando and I have discussed for some time. We want you to have every opportunity to follow your dreams, whatever path you choose. Enrique was speechless, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never thought much about the future other than wanting to help his family. But now, with this generous offer, he began to imagine all the possibilities that were within his reach. I don't know how to thank you," he said, still trying to process the magnitude of the offer. "There's no need to thank you, Enrique. You've already done so much for all of us. "Consider this an investment in the future of someone who has the potential to change the world," replied Tanya, with a sincerity that deeply touched the young man. Over time, Henrique accepted the offer and began preparing for college. He chose to study education, inspired by the work he had been doing as a tutor and mentor. He wanted to continue helping others learn, grow, and reach their full potential, just as he had been helped throughout his life. Henrique's decision to pursue a career in education brought immense pride to his family and Tanya. He dedicated himself to his studies with the same passion and determination that he had shown in all other areas of his life. During his college years, Henrique was involved in numerous projects, always looking for ways to positively impact the community around him. When he finally graduated, Henrique returned to his community, determined to give back everything he had received. He began working as a teacher at a local school, where he quickly became well-liked by students, parents, and colleagues. He not only taught academic subjects, but also values, empathy, and the importance of helping others. And so, Henrique's life, which had been shaped by a simple act of kindness when he was still a child, became a cycle of generosity and positive impact. He never forgot the man in the park, whose presence had triggered a series of events that transformed his life forever. Instead, he used this memory as a beacon, guiding him in every decision he made. Henrique continued to inspire everyone around him, showing that regardless of the circumstances, there is always room for kindness and compassion. His story was told among members of the community, as an example of how a single act can have repercussions that extend far beyond what we can imagine. Henrique and Tanya's families remained close, celebrating together the achievements and challenges that arose over the years. And as time passed, Henrique became an increasingly respected figure, not only for his professional achievements, but for the unshakable character he demonstrated in all situations. On a sunny afternoon, years later, Henrique was sitting on a bench in the same park where it all began. He watched the children playing, running from one place to another with the same energy and enthusiasm he had when he was a child. Life had given him many opportunities, and he had made the most of them. But he knew that all this had started with a simple gesture, with the offer of a sandwich and a bottle of water to an unknown man. Henrique smiled to himself, feeling a deep gratitude for the path his life had taken. He knew there was still a lot to be done, many challenges to be faced, but he was ready. He had been prepared for this by life, by his family, and by everyone who crossed his path. And with this certainty in his heart, he got up from the bench, ready to continue his journey, always guided by the same kindness and compassion that had taken him there.